Hey, what's good, fight fans? Thanks for clicking on another video, another Bite Down Boxing video. I am RL Woodson, host of the Bite Down Boxing podcast, and I just wanted to get into a quick recap video of last night's IBF Middleweight title fight between Danny Jacobs and Sergiy Derevyanchenko. I did the same thing last night after the fight and got everything up and found out like I had like a chopped and screwed audio, something I messed around, some setting that I hit on my microphone or whatever the program, and it was chopped and screwed like Houston style analysis. So maybe that was a foreshadowing of Lions Only with the Charlo brothers, or Jermall Charlo and Danny Jacobs, if that fight should happen. Hey, I'm not gonna keep this video. I'm not gonna make this video go too long because I already did it. You already know what the results are. They're down there on the scroll. Probably either later on today or tomorrow, I'll mess around and get up the new Bite Down Boxing podcast. I had one guest, maybe two, but one fighter that I wanted to come on who's actually a part of a recent announcement for a fight coming up in mid-November. So I do want to get him on and kind of introduce him to my audience and just get the word. He's kind of a character in a way, in a good way. So we'll try to get that together. So let's get into, and then before I get started, shout out to Alberto Machado on his first round destruction of Cleveland. Another bad weekend for Ohio boxing, ladies and gentlemen, but Wandale Evans was just completely just never got into the fight, and despite it being against, working against the Ohio fighter, Machado really showed me something, although Evans was kind of coming up from featherweight. So again, that's that smoke and mirrors aspect of boxing that's kind of always there if we're really paying attention. The one thing that I didn't like was that Machado did not call out an obvious opponent, future opponent in Gervonta Tank Davis. But what I did like was that he somebody got in his ear and encouraged him to switch over to just speaking in Spanish, because it was like he only had a couple of things on or a couple of go-tos in English to say. I can't remember the phrase that he kept saying last night, but it was good that when he really needed to explain himself, he went to his native language and got his thinking out there instead of Max Kellerman asking for a response that he clearly couldn't give in English. So I like that he switched over to Spanish and had to say and got to say what he wanted to say. 3 knockdowns in that fight, with Wandale ending up on his back at the end of the first round and not being able to continue from there. Great performance for him. The other thing was the women's fight. I'll get into these more on the podcast, but wonderful performance by both Heather Hardy and Shelly Vincent. Shout out to the ladies getting in a good rumble on one of the final HBO telecasts. Like I said, I'll get into that more later. So let's talk about Danny Jacobs and the Miracle Man and Sergiy Derevyanchenko. Going into the fight, I thought it was a very touching moment for Jacobs to share his thoughts about his former trainer, a guy who got him started out in Victor Roundtree. That was very heartfelt moment for the telecast. Also, was everybody on board with? I felt like it was a different tone for the show, and for Max and Roy Jones, for Roy Jones and Jim Lampley. I felt like it was a better, kind of a brief reset for them in how they've been. Some of the complaints that I've heard boxing Twitter and social media stick on the last couple years. I thought they avoided a lot of that stuff for the most part. So shout out to them. Also, before I jump into my little notes, the Sunday sermon by Eric Duran is up on BiteDownBoxing.com. He did a recap of the this weekend's fights. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but do go over to the site and check that out, please. But let's get into it. I scored the fight a draw. I had it 114-114. However, you know, I did have one round. I thought I gave a 10-10 round in round 7. There were a couple other rounds that were pretty close to me. Round 6 was a really good round, a really well-fought round. But, yeah, you know, Julie Letterman, I saw some criticism of her with her having the only card in favor of Derevyanchenko at 114-113. And it was a split, you know, the official decision was a split decision in favor of Jacobs, with the other two judges scoring it 115-112 and 115-112. So, I don't know. We can all say what we want to say. Who am I to know any better than you and those of you that watch the sport week in and week out? I don't know if this performance, while it was a good performance and a great fight, you know, a great championship fight, I don't know if it's a performance that really solidifies Jacobs as a future opponent for Canelo, who we don't know if he's going to come back down to middleweight. I would think that he would once things kind of settle in and he gets a lay of the land at 68 and 60. I would think he comes down and does some work at 60. I also don't know if it really showed clear levels between Danny Jacobs and you know, a potential fight with Jermall Charlo. I didn't like that Derevyanchenko. I knew he was a volume punching guy. You know, his nickname, the Technician, is very fitting. You know, he did have the knockdown in the first round, towards the end of the round, and you know, that kind of happened abruptly, and it could have been over from there. But the guy fought his way back into it, and I guess that's my main, for me, the story of this fight for me, which led me to the 114-114 was and I hope my math is good here, but it was two guys fighting at completely different speeds, one, and then secondly, they fought at those two different speeds for pretty much the entire fight. So it made it very difficult for me to really, I guess that's why I have it the way that I have it. It looks like in total punches, just 21 punches, you know, the advantage of Jacobs, landed 21 more total punches, and then power punches, it was even, according to HBO's CompuBox or whatever it is, the stats they provide. It was 137 to 137. Danny Jacobs was at a much higher accuracy of 45% to Derevyanchenko's, I believe it was 28% was what they gave. So it's kind of what you like. You know, I thought I didn't know. I don't know if I could. Well, I guess I do know. I really couldn't credit Danny Jacobs with his ring generalship and his defensive slickness and slipping some of the shots, standing his ground for most of the fight. I don't know if I could. And then, you know, some of his flurries and combinations in different junctures of the fight. I don't know if that was enough for me to to totally negate Derevyanchenko's pressure and constantly bringing the fight to Jacobs, having him on the back. I mean, having him with his back against the ropes. And another thing that looks bad for me, just the optics of it. I don't know. I was trying to see if and I've walked by Danny Jacobs once or twice. I don't know if he's really a little bow-legged or pigeon-toed. I know he has the really slender legs, and I think that's what got him in trouble with Triple G in their fight when he sustained a knockdown. It's not that he was really hurt, although it was a pretty good shot from Triple G. it's almost like his legs were a little weak and just gave way and landed him resulted in him getting the knockdown against Triple G. And so here, a lot of times throughout the fight, I just felt like his legs didn't look right. And, from watching it on TV, I honestly couldn't tell some of the work inside, against the ropes when he was being forced against the ropes and Derevyanchenko was up in his chest. I really couldn't tell that those shots were not landing. We didn't see a problem with Jacobs' chin per se. I mean, he seemed to take most of the shots well. He did mention that he was buzzed once or twice. He also mentioned the phrase gasking or something, but obviously it's right after a very well hard fought battle. So you can't take every word these guys say and run with it. But I think another thing that kept it close for me is the fact that Jacobs, while his body work over the first half, the first third of the fight was phenomenal and was very telling, he went away from the body work over the last 6 rounds. He also went away from his jab a lot. So, like I said, I just don't know if I saw enough from Jacobs to outweigh the pressure and the grit of Derevyanchenko, who really could have just went away, in the first few rounds. And that's another thing, another knock against Jacobs. That's the reason why I couldn't give him the Triple G fight and this whole notion of him fighting down to the level of his opposition. He knew late over the last 3 rounds against Triple G that the Canelo fight was out there on the horizon. And if you think you can fight at a level that you're comfortable with to get that victory, no. That's a multi-million-dollar fight, lingering. That's a $50-60 million fight that's out there if this fighter gets past you. Do you think you don't need to go out there and clearly put the fight in the bag? So again here, I saw some wider margins. We know that Letterman's card was really wide. I didn't agree with it. I'm cool with the 115, 112 if that's the way the 2 judges saw it. They are there in person. They see the impact of these shots. They see whether most of them land cleanly, if they have the right angles and whatnot. So I'm fine with Jacobs winning it. Just like I said, I didn't see enough over the second half of that fight to definitively say that Derevyanchenko didn't fight his way back into a draw. So we'll see what happens next. A lot of exciting stuff, obviously, with Andre and Canelo being over there on the zone, with Andre being with Matchroom Boxing USA. Obviously, those are easier fights to make than a Jermall Charlo fight, but I'm interested to see what Jacobs does next. It was a good fight, great fight. Like I said, a good night for HBO boxing. I wonder if there's enough positivity from this to reconsider, what they're gonna do. I was listening to XM Radio Friday night at the fight show, and they mentioned that HBO probably will pursue. So, and Lampley was actually a guest on there, but they hinted that HBO will pursue some one-off fights. Maybe dip their beak in the water here and there to see if it's something that they can do at HBO. But the one thing, and I might have saw a tweet about this or the end of a tweet or a retweet, but the one thing was didn't they preview like a upcoming Antoine Fuqua directed documentary about Muhammad Ali? I forget the name of it. But it's almost like some of the TV series that I've criticized on the Pay Me No Mind videos something like Survivor's Remorse, where they're and actually Ballers. We don't see any basketball or football in either of those programs, but that's what the shows center around, is a basketball player and a football player. But that's what the show is about. And here it is, HBO, if you think you're only going to do documentaries and the Bryant Gumbel show, Real Sports, but not actually have the one sport that you can have on your program, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think there's one more card I think that's left, and then there's also the Loeffler card with Brekus and Chocolatito. I think that was for like the early mid part of December is out there. But anyway, that's it, man. Let me know what you think down in the columns. Like I said, this was a very tough fight for me to call from the house. From the couch. But a good showing. Again, like I said, it didn't separate Danny Jacobs from the few guys right beneath him, and it didn't do a whole lot for him, in my opinion, and looking forward to maybe with Triple G a little bit more. But then we heard what Danny said, that Triple G is no longer a champion. So I don't know. I really don't know. Like I said, holler at me if you think I'm wrong or you disagree. I had it 114. But salute to Danny Jacobs, one of my favorite men in the sport of boxing, and the way that he conducts himself. So we'll see what happens next. Hey, like I end everything, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And thanks for clicking on that. Please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me, and continue to support the channel. And like I said, again, check out Eric Duran, Mr. 60 Minutes Box. Check out his Sunday sermon that's up at Bite Down Boxing right now. Take care.